The session is laid out in a very interesting, straightforward format. So I would want you guys to quickly grab a notepad and, if possible, even grab a cup of coffee, because we are going to have quite a lot of insights to go through today's session. What I've done is I've basically made 4 parts to this session. For all of you who are joining, I recommend you join us for all the 4 sessions. No problem if you miss out on a session, don't worry. We'll also send out videos, shouldn't be a problem. But I strongly recommend you be a part of the sessions, because we'll have live Q&A going on. The first session, which is today, we'd be starting off with the AD auditing session, where we'll be getting the Active Directory set for auditing. We'll go forward and talk about how ADAudit Plus can be configured. The next session, which is day 2, we'll be talking about how to set up your ADAudit Plus for critical alerts, how to configure user behavior analytics, and quite a lot. And the third session is going to be to ensure that you don't just stop with basic auditing, but go further and get your ADAudit to work to its fullest extent. There are quite a few functionalities that are hidden under the hood, and we'd want you to use those functionalities as well. We'll be talking about how do you scale up your auditing basically, and the last session is going to be making the best out of your ADAudit Plus. So through the 4 days, I'll be giving you a lot of tips, tricks, best practices, configuration settings, and all of that. So make sure you have a notepad and note them. And in case if you have questions coming your way, please shoot them then and there. All right. So we'll quickly start off by understanding as to what was our agenda behind today's session and what we intend to cover through the course of this session. We'll try and understand as to why an administrator needs to have an auditing system in place. That's the first thing that we'll try and understand. And I'm sure most of us joining today would obviously know the importance of auditing, and would have had their go at configuring auditing, and would have also had quite a lot of trouble in making use of your native auditing tools. So when it's around that time of the year when your auditor comes over to your office and asks for an auditing report, you would necessarily not want to get your head around it, try generating so many reports from your native tools, putting them together, collating all those Excel sheets. I was there. I've done that, been there, done that. Quite hard for administrators. Not an easy thing to do if you did not have assistance, if you did not have a tool to do all that weightlifting and that hard work. So we'll be talking about what challenges you will be facing if you were to do it the native way. Not that it's not powerful, but then it's not the best way to do it. So we'll also be going forward and talking about those specific challenges that ADAudit Plus as a tool is going to help you solve. For that, we will need to be able to set up ADAudit Plus first. We'll be doing that. And then when it comes to doing things the ADAudit Plus way, you would need one account with the right privileges. All we ask for is just one account. What we try to do is take the least privilege approach, try to cut down as many number of touch points are there onto your native Active Directory, just to give you that secure and safe feeling. And obviously that's the best way to do it as well. So we'll be talking about configuring that one account. It could be your service account or your own account for that matter, configuring it right so that your ADAudit Plus works to its fullest. And then, yes, we'll be talking about how to go beyond native auditing policies, how ADAudit Plus can up the game for you, and finally, certain key functionalities of ADAudit Plus. The last point is going to be spoken about in greater detail in the upcoming session, so that is very much the agenda for the day. So we all have this one question in our mind, right? Why auditing? So that's exactly what we'll be starting off. When it comes to organizations, most of the time it is like this. All your users are pretty happy. Everything seems to be working absolutely fine. No problem at all. That's the first thing that comes to your mind when you look at this picture. Now, is this the same point of view that an attacker or a hacker, or even for that matter, a potential insider have when they're taking a look at your organization? For them, they don't really care as to how things look from the outside. For them, all that matters is that one weak link. And many a times, you know how our users are. The security of your organization is only as strong as the weakest link, and in this case, the weakest link is your users. Why? You have a very complex SIM solution in place. You have, even for that matter, ADAudit Plus implemented at your place. But still, you have users who write their passwords down on a piece of paper and stick it right on top of their desktop. What do we do about them? So an attacker would want to find out that one vulnerability or weak spot and target right there. So I'm pretty sure you would not want to be that administrator who oversees that, or who who does not take enough precautions for that. So all we'll have to understand is your attacker is going to spend quite a lot of time understanding your user's behavior, figuring out what or how your user operates. For them, it's all about that one weak link that I was pointing out. So what we need to do is to have a solution in place. Even Microsoft agrees for an attack to roll out, or for an attack to happen, it takes about quite some time, quite a lot of preparation. In fact, I'd say the attacker who's out there is going to understand your user's behavior. He's going to plan it out well in advance, do all his or her research and preparation, and then compromise one host. All that's needed is just one basic account, and within a span of 24 hours, or at best 2 days, the attacker gets hold of the domain admin credentials. What are you going to do about that? So there are certain things that are under our control, and there are other things that we cannot control. Let's say your solution or your security system did not pick or pinpoint the attacker when this was happening, when the attacker had infiltrated. Not a problem. Still, you can contain or curtail or mitigate damage that could probably be happened due to a data exfiltration. So Microsoft gave away this infographic piece at their conference, the Ignite conference that happens every year. And trust me, a lot of administrators were astounded by the fact that Active Directory is not secure. So this is a given fact. So that's exactly why an administrator, a proactive one, if I were to go on and say, just like the ones who are joining us today, I'm pretty sure you guys would want this to be in place. An auditing system that can backtrack and help you do an RCA, or a root cause analysis. So we would essentially need this. Because before actually the attack gets detected, it takes a couple of months. So if you were to backtrack, if you were to find out what went wrong, and if you want to curtail the damage, you would need a solid auditing system in place. Because like I told you, statistics has it, 68% of these breaches take months together to discover. If that is the case, what exactly are you going to be doing? How exactly are you going to be helping your organization not be a victim of this attack? So it all starts with not the administrator not having the ability or not having the intention, but the administrator not having the right set of tools. Why would I say that? Because if you were to take into consideration the Microsoft way of doing it, it's quite tedious. That's how I would like to call it. It's quite tedious. There are quite a lot of logs that you'll necessarily need to consider when you're going on and working, backtracking an event like this. Hundreds of events that you'd need to essentially remember out of your head to find out which event correlates to which one. In fact, if I were to show you like a real-time example, I'm going to quickly get into my working setup and show you how it would look like. I'm going to quickly pull up my event viewer. This is all you have when you are talking about all security logs that are in your place. So if I were to list all the logs, let me quickly list all the logs. If you were to backtrack an attack, this is all you get. Would you want to skim through thousands of log data to find out that one malicious activity? You would not necessarily want to do this. You have so many different audit events that are recorded right here, ones that you can't manually go through one at a time and figure out where was the first touch point or what had gone wrong. So that is a very big challenge with most of the administrator. Event viewer that's available by default isn't going to really help you get the job done. And again, you wouldn't really know to correlate. would you be referring to a huge master list of all those events that are available every single time, or remember all those events? Because there are so many categories. When it comes to attacks, it could be an attack that is essentially one that can be backtracked to log on, log off. How would you be able to calculate that? How would you be able to remember that? It could probably be an attack where an account gets compromised or an account gets taken over. How would you be able to backtrack that? Which event ID would you be able to relate back to? So this is quite a huge challenge for most of the administrators. In fact, if you were to go on and do it the PowerShell way, I'm pretty sure administrators love PowerShell. Hands down, I myself am a big fan of PowerShell, but there are certain limitations. If I was given the time, which administrators don't get, if I was given the resource again, which administrators don't get, I would very much just stick to using PowerShell. Not a problem at all. But if I were to do it the PowerShell way, it's going to take a lot of time. It's not going to give me user-friendly reports to crunch. It's not going to give me immediate results, which is the case most of the times. The organization wants you to give them a solution right away. Your organization or management calls you up right after a breach had occurred and ask you or demand you for an immediate response. What are you going to do with PowerShell? It's going to be quite tedious. And when it comes to the native storage that is available with your Active Directory, I'm pretty sure you're aware that it gets overwritten every now and then. There is a limitation or a restriction to the amount of event logs that can be stored, and your event viewer overwrites all of them right when the limit reaches. Is that going to be of any help when the actual attack had taken place 5 months ago and your Active Directory has no trace of those logs? What are you going to do right now? So as I was saying earlier, it's not the fault of an administrator. It is essentially the lack of a functionality in a tool. And Microsoft, having had Active Directory for quite some time, almost about 2 decades now, should have definitely worked on that. And I, as an administrator, at least I was an administrator earlier, I totally relate to your problem. So that's exactly where ADAudit Plus comes into the picture. So if you were to already been working your way through ADAudit Plus, you would understand that ADAudit Plus does quite a lot around Active Directory change auditing. That's what ADAudit Plus does. It could be user objects that you'd want to audit. When it comes to user objects, you would want to get fine-grained. You would want to understand their behavior. You would want to know when a user logged on. Or you would probably even want to audit something as simple as their working hours. So there are quite a few things that you'd want to audit when it comes to users. And at all times, you would not just want to audit them, but also perform an action on top of those auditing insights that you've drawn, and the tool facilitates that. So you would want to be able to audit logon failures. Now this is a huge problem for most of the administrators. You'd want to know what was the source of the logon. You'd be able to understand that very clearly with ADAudit Plus. You'd also want to be able to audit membership changes. So this comes into the picture. This essentially comes into the picture when you would want to audit membership changes for critical groups. So if there are any administrative groups, you would want to ensure that they are audited right. OU management, again, that comes into the picture, and you would want to see what OUs were changed. Group policy object changes, you'd want to track them. So ADAudit Plus does quite a lot around it. If you were to ask me how ADAudit Plus does all this, here is your guide to how ADAudit Plus works. So ADAudit Plus sits on top of your infrastructure. It fetches logs from all these sources that I've pointed right here. It could be your Azure, Active Directory, your AD on your Azure, your workstations, your applications, NetApp, and all of that. It fetches all of those logs. It has its own way of getting things done. It has its own audit database where it essentially pulls in all those log activities, and then from there on, it archives the data if you need it for later reference, or if you want an alert to pop out of the system when a threshold is breached, you can do that. The ADAudit Plus component does it for you. Or if you want to churn that or crunch that and have it sent over to your SIM solution, you must be having your SIM solution. It could be Log360 from ManageEngine or Splunk or any other SIM solution that you have in place. You'd be very well able to do that. So this is more like a primer today. The first session and that's the reason why I'm giving you an introduction as to why auditing is important and how ADAudit Plus can help you do this, and all of this from the comfort of your web browser. I'm pretty sure the ones using ADAudit Plus already would start appreciating this. So when it comes to how ADAudit Plus gets it done, it has an Windows API sitting between the Active Directory domain controller and the solution to make things simple or easy to collect logs effectively and to do it in real time. This helps. So if you're starting out, ensure that you free out ports 135. You free out ports 389. If you were to want ADAudit Plus to work with Active Directory, get your 389 opened out for this specific requirement. And once that's done, ADAudit Plus can very effectively pull data from your Active Directory and pull security logs from the configured workstations and server and crunch them and pop them right on your web browser. So we usually run it on 8081, the tool, so have that opened as well. If you want to configure it to a custom one, we let you do that, so feel free to do that as well. So when it comes to the configuration, it's quite straightforward. I'm pretty sure most of you joining today already have a much better configuration than this. The basic one would require you to have a 64-bit Windows installation. That's a recommendation. And if you were to be working with a RAM of 4 GB and upwards, that is absolutely more than enough. Disk space of 40 GB is great. And as a recommendation, I would suggest you have your ADAudit Plus configured on a member server and not on a domain controller, or not on the same server as that of your DC. So this usually helps to get your load balanced effectively. So ensure that it's on different server and not on your DC. That's a tip for you. And again, if you're working with the processor, anything 2 gigahertz upward is absolutely fine. So these are the minimum requirements for ADAudit Plus. When it comes to the system requirements, operating systems that are supported are quite straightforward. We support almost all major client and server operating systems from 2008 to 2016. It could be your physical device, it could be a virtual instance, it doesn't really matter. We support all of that. And when it comes to ADAudit Plus, it also works or it comes with Postgres SQL as the default database that powers ADAudit Plus. That's another information for you. And the supported platforms, it is quite endless, but then to name the most important ones, it supports NetApp files, clusters, EMC servers, and the whole package. So getting to the actual configuration for today's session. So we are going to start off by configuring ADAudit Plus. I was telling you all I will need is just one account. So I will want to set up an account for the administrative actions right here. So we will start off by allowing that specific object. It could be an user object, in this case you as the user object, or it could be an administrative account, or if you want to call it a service account, you might as well do that. So we'll need 4 critical credentials for that account, and I've listed all of them right for you. And we'll start off by configuring each one of them. So we'll start with allowing the user object or the service account object to have the provision to perform object level auditing. That's the first point for the day. That's the first configuration that we're going to be doing. This is essentially to help that specific user account configured behind ADAudit Plus to be able to manage those audit and security logs. So how are we going to do that? Alright, so if you have your ADAudit Plus installed, and if you're going to be working with me parallelly, this is going to be quite easy. We'll get all of these configurations done in under less than 20 minutes. That's how much it would take. So I'm going to start off by configuring the auditing and security logs, turning it on for that specific user. You get your GPM or your group policy management console. Just a quick second. I'm going to look up for my GPM. There you go. I've got my GPM. The next thing is I get to my domain. I get to my domain right here. I would want to then go to my default domain policy. Alright. So once that's done, I would want to go to my computer configuration. How do I do that? I get to the group policy management editor. So the first requisite is to get the user to have the provision to audit security logs, audit and have access to it. So what I'm going to do is I've got into the group policy management editor under computer configuration. just a quick second, you get to policies, and then you get to the Windows settings. Now we will need to get the security settings configured right for that user. Under local policies, the configuration under requirement is the user right assignment. So what am I trying to do right here? I have a user in my mind, or it could be me, and this user needs to get the provision to be able to manage and audit security logs. So here you go, you have to get this configured right. So you will be able to specify which user needs to have that provision, and you go on and look up for that user. In this case, my name is Jay, so I am the user. You could look up for that and add the user and hit apply. All right, quite simple. You could browse for the user, say Jay. I've got Jay. I say okay. Right, J is the user, and then I say apply and I say okay. So what have I done? Quickly walking you through once again. I've got to my group policy management console. Under my default domain policy, I've headed over to the computer configuration, to the policies right here, and in this case my concern is for my Windows settings, and the security settings is what I'm worried about. So I would want to get to my local policies and ensure that the user right assignment is done right, which is my ultimate aim. I get to user assignment and then the one that I want to enable is manage auditing and security log. So that is my first checkbox to tick. So to get my account to have the provision to be able to do this, assign user rights, here you go, and I get that first checkbox done. So that's the first step that you'll need to ensure you've got it right. The second step is to be able to give them the provision to read the event log. So ADAudit Plus is essentially powered by event logs. So ADAudit Plus needs to have an account that has all the privileges to read event logs. That's the first important requirement. So for you to be able to get your ADAudit Plus to effectively generate reports real time, this is a must have. So we are talking about getting your event log reader group to have your AD user. So now what I'll have to do is, since this is a user action, I'm getting into my Active Directory users and computers console. I will have to get to my built-in tab. All right, the group that I'll have to look up for is event log readers. The second important checkbox that you'll have to have in mind is to get to your ADUC, get to your built-in folder, specify that group, which is the event log readers group, and add a user to a group. So the user is going to be, in this case, JAY again, which is me. So I have happily put the user J under this group. I've made J the member of event log readers. So this is essentially for what again? For ADAudit Plus to be able to access event logs. And why is that essential? For ADAudit Plus to be able to generate reports in real time, because it wants to crunch all these event logs and give you out insightful information. So that is the second step. Oh, to make it even simple, let me have numbers right next to them. So the first step is done. The next step is to be able to grant access to read event logs, and the next one is to be able to allow them to create or edit GPO. Now, if you're wondering if you really want to do this step, because some administrators aren't very comfortable letting a solution or a software to work with their GPO, but I suggest, trust me, take my word for it, go on, grant the solution the privilege. In fact, I will give you the reason as to why you will need to do it at a later point in time. Towards the end of the session, you will understand why. So we are talking about making the user or the service account a member of group policy creators group. Just a quick second, I'm going to get to my ADUC. I've got to my ADUC this time. This is the users that I'm talking about, and the group that is of my concern is the group policy creators group policy creator owner. So it's quite self-explanatory. Members in this group can modify group policy for their domain. So this is the functionality that I'd want my ADAudit Plus to have, and therefore I would want, sorry, just a quick second. Seem to have a pop-ups. How do I get this away? Just a quick second, getting this rid. So we were talking about giving your users the right privileges. So we are talking about giving your Active Directory, getting to your Active Directory users in Computers Console and ensuring that the group policy creator owner groups has this specific user. In this case, just a quick second, getting back. All right, there we are. Users get to the group, which is the group policy creator security group. And then what do I want to do? I want to ensure that I have J as a member of this group. So J is already a member. So in this case, if you have your administrator or the service account, please add that specific group as well. So if you're wondering why ADAudit Plus needs the provision to be able to create group policies, you'll understand why at a later point in time through today's session. So we've done that as well. So 3 things of my checkbox or checklist done. I've made the user or given the provision for that user to perform object level auditing. That was the first requirement. The next one was to give the provision to read event logs, and the third one was to be able to edit or create GPOs, and the last one, all right, the 4th point, which is to grant domain component services permissions and WMI permissions. If you're talking about Windows failover clusters, this doesn't usually apply to all of you, but in case if you're working with Windows failover clusters, you would want to ensure that your component services and WMI permissions are set right. So how do you do that? So you get to your Active Directory right here, your server right here, quickly getting into your tools. We are talking about component services, and under component services, the tool that we would want to enable is the launch and activation permission. Under COM security, you get to launch and activation permission. So when we are talking about granting privileges for your administrator user or the one on your ADAudit Plus, when they're working with Windows failover cluster, what's the first permission? The first permission is to ensure that your DCOM or your domain component services is configured right. How do you get there? Pretty simple. Look up for component services under your computer. When you get to the settings, get to COM security, and you would want to launch or modify the limits for launch and activation permissions, launching applications and activating objects. All right, so how do you do that? You say edit limits, you add the user that needs to be a part of the list. In this case, it's going to be J or administrator. Just quickly looking up for the administrative user, J, lovely, say okay, and then you give them all privileges right here. So you would want the solution to be able to launch all applications and at the same time activate objects. So you would want to select all of this and say okay, right? So the last checkbox is also done. One half of it is done, which is enabling DCOM. The next one is for WMI permissions. So for you to get to WMI permissions, quickly using a shortcut, WMI control, properties, get to security, get to root. Under CIMV2, the namespace, you'd be able to get to security once more and then click on security right here, and there you go. You have a provision to add a user to the root, right? Who's the user? J. So what are we doing right here? We are trying to give ADAudit Plus the provision to work with WMI permissions as well. The user now gets WMI permissions. So you will want to enable all checkboxes for that specific user here. Since it's me and I have the provision to check all checkboxes, I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same. I've checked all the checkboxes. I'm saying apply and I'm saying okay. So we have successfully got the first and foremost step, which is getting the user or service account configured. This is a much better terminology. Get your service account for ADAudit Plus configured right. A quick recap. I know this is a little overwhelming, and that's the reason why I've tried to be really slow as I demonstrated. And don't worry, just in case if you missed out on a point, don't worry at all. I'm going to be sending the video for this presentation anyways. So we've been working to give that specific service account 4 critical privileges: the one to manage your auditing and security log, a provision to read through event logs, a provision to be able to edit or create group policies, and just in case if you're working with failover clusters, provision to work with the component services and WMI permissions. So this is the first step. The first step is successfully done. What's the next step? The user for ADAudit Plus is successfully configured. Now you would want to get your Active Directory prepped up. So you would want to ensure that your Active Directory audits or is ready for auditing the right set of things, the ones that you want your system to audit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly get to my browser. Meanwhile, I'm going to share a link to you on the chat. Watch out for the chat in 3, 2, 1, and there you go. So please click on this link. It's going to take you to a page. Let me quickly pull that page up for you. Alright, so this is the help manual for ADAudit Plus. The link is going to give you an online help documentation for ADAudit Plus. Our intention is to ensure that your ADAudit Plus is configured right, and at the same time your Active Directory is also configured right. Just a quick second. Let me get that fixed. Perfect. So we would want to ensure that your Active Directory is prepped up. Alright, so you would need to get to the guide. We are getting started. We are essentially starting off. So you would want to configure your audit policies, configuring audit policies, and then the next thing to do is to ensure that you get your configuration done right for your domain controllers. Alright, here you would want to get to the manual configuration bit. You can do it automatically or you can do it manually. I suggest you start off doing it manually. ADAudit Plus can definitely do it automatically as well. I'm pretty sure you remember some while back I was talking about ADAudit Plus needing the provision to modify and work with GPOs. That is exactly why the automatic configuration comes into the picture, but I'm sure some administrators are not comfortable with that. For them, manual configuration always works, and it's quite straightforward and simple. It's not going to take you more than 5 minutes. Get to the manual configuration bit, and then you have a list of audit policies with which you can work with. So this list will effectively tell you what are those critical Active Directory audit policies would you want to turn on, would you want to start auditing, would you want to keeping track of. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the chat window. Please watch out for the message on your chat right now. I've sent you the link to it, so please go through this. This is straightforward. It'll give you the provision to understand why and what audit policies need to be configured for auditing. So Active Directory by default does not have it turned on, so you will need to get into it and tell Active Directory to start auditing, and that's exactly what we just did. The steps here are going to help you do that. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through those steps any which ways. So let me quickly get to my GPM, my group policy management console. All right, here I am. So I would want to start off with my audit policy. How do I navigate to it? The domain, and then you get to the default domain policy right here. Okay, right. You would then want to ensure that you have it configured right. You click edit. This opens up the editor. So I'm trying to edit my default domain policy. The configuration that I'm doing is essentially with my computer, so it's a policies under that. It's a Windows setting that I'm talking about, so Windows setting. And then the next thing is, since it's a security operation that we're working with, I get to security operations, and at a local policy level, I would want to ensure that my audit policies are configured the way I want them to work. So it was quite simple, straightforward. We are talking about GPOs and editing GPOs just so that they work your way. In this case, it's the audit policy that we were working with. Recapping it quite quickly, ADAudit Plus can help you audit, but you will need to turn this on first for ADAudit Plus to work. So ADAudit Plus Workshop, which is the domain, get to the default domain policy. You're right there, perfect. And then you edit it. You start with policies, you get to Windows settings, and then since it's the security settings that you're wanting to work with, you get to local policies and specify the audit policies that need to be turned on. So let me quickly take an example, and I'll tell you why it is essential to go one policy at a time or all over them if you're doing it the manual way. So you get right here and you see that by default it's not turned on. You would want to define these policy settings, but even when you click that, all that Active Directory does by default is to say just success. Is that going to be good enough? Let's assume that you're being attacked. Let's assume that an attacker has initiated a brute force attack on your organization. If that's the case, if failure were not to be turned on, you would never really be able to backtrack. You would need both success and failure. Let's say the attacker failed 9 times, and on the 10th attempt the attacker successfully logs in. If that's what we are talking about, then if this were turned off, then you would not have any logs to track back. So you would definitely need to turn this on as well. So I'm pretty sure now you appreciate as to why it is difficult to manually do the whole thing. I have quite a few policies right here, and these aren't even advanced. I'm just talking about basic audit policies under my security settings. So I would want to ensure that all of these activities, audit account management activities, are turned on. Audit directory service access, I would want to turn on all of that. Go on audit privilege users, I would want to do that. So if I were to do this, this isn't quite effective. And if I were to talk about like a huge environment, I would also not just want to stop myself with the basic configuration. I would definitely want to get granular, and there are things that need to be audited granular, and that is exactly why you will need your advanced audit policies configured your way. When I get to advanced audit policies, I have quite a bunch of activities that I can audit. So unlike the previous case, when I just get into one of those activities, which is account logon, you're able to see that there are other aspects of account logon that can also be audited and tracked. So you would want to essentially ensure that these aspects are also audited, and at times an administrator would want to take this conscious call of either doing it granularly or at a basic level. So if you're having a requirement of doing it granularly, you get to the advanced audit policies and you turn them on one by one again, and you're doing it the manual way. But what you also know that is there is a provision to do all of this automatically. You can do it with ADAudit Plus if you've given ADAudit Plus the GPO privileges. So that's a point for you. Turn on the GPO privileges and keep it quite simple, do it automatically. Or if you're not really sure, if you're just getting used to ADAudit Plus, not a big problem. It's going to take you a couple of extra minutes to configure it the manual way. So we are here trying to ensure that the audit policies are done at a fine grain level to ensure that the subcategories take over or take precedence over the actual basic audit policies. So by default, Active Directory or your GPO does not let your advanced audit policy take precedence over your basic audit policy. So how do you go about ensuring that your advanced Active Directory policies, account policies, take privilege? So pretty simple. You'll have to again get into your security options. All right, you will need to ensure that you turn this option on. Force audit policy subcategory settings to override audit policy settings. Not confusing at all. Very straightforward. So all you'll have to do is start off by figuring out what is your checklist of things to do. So towards the end of the session, I am going to share a PDF with you, all right, either today or tomorrow, a PDF that has a checklist of things to do, so you don't need to fret. Don't worry, I'll give you a checklist one step at a time. You can go one step at a time and get this done. So we are talking about the security settings and ensuring that the security option of forcing your granular auditing to take precedence over your basic auditing. So we are talking about advanced auditing taking precedence over basic auditing. So simple as that. You enable this option, properties, get to that, say enable, hit apply, and you're good to go. So what have we done so far? We've worked with ensuring that your audit policies are configured right. We've got to advanced audit policies, we've turned them on as well. And as a best practice, since we want your advanced audit policies to take precedence, we have enabled them, or we have forced them to override your existing audit policies. That is done. And the next bit is for you to audit the auditing, right? Do you get that? You audit the auditing. And how do you do that? You do it by configuring your SACL. Alright, so let's quickly get to configuring that right. So you get your Active Directory users in Computers Console. You ensure that the advanced functionality feature is turned on. If not, please turn it on. Once that's done, your entitled or your view will modify, and you'll be able to get to this advanced feature of being able to add all your users. So we are talking about working on the domain. We're talking about ensuring that an advanced functionality is enabled, and that functionality is going to help you configure all your security ACLs. So here you go. I've got into my security tab. I get to my advanced settings, and under auditing, I've done so much work now just configuring, right? I would not want to miss this last step, which is ensuring that every user in the organization is audited, or I turn on the auditing for the entire domain. So how do I do that? Pretty simple. I've already turned it on in my case. In most of the cases, if it's brand new or you're just getting your auditing turned on, you would not have this specific security principle already configured, which is everyone. So you would want to audit changes that are happening in your Active Directory across domain, and you would want to audit every single object, every single user, be it groups, users, security principles, all of that. So you search everyone, say okay, and there you go. You have the list of things that need to be audited, and that is right here for you. So you have that principle as well configured, and then you say okay, and then you again say okay, just to ensure that your configuration for SACL is also done right. So you ensure all these is possible by getting into your ADUC. Let me quickly get back to my ADUC. Just a quick second. Right, got there. What did I do? I wanted to have an advanced functionality. Now this looks plain and simple. When I turn advanced functionalities on, I have the provision to get to my advanced features, where I get into security, get into advanced, and get into auditing for my entire domain, and ensure everyone is a part of this group. So I've successfully got everyone to be audited by my solution. So that was my ultimate aim, and I've got that. So what have I done? I've turned on auditing for all important events. That's the first thing that I did. The next one was to configure advanced audit policies, and I also ensure that my advanced audit policies are in a position to override my basic auditing policies, and I also got my SACL to be working fine. And how did I do that? Everyone, that's the magic word. I got everyone to be audited, as simple as that. So we're done with two essential steps. I'm trying to be as slow and straightforward as possible, just so that you get it right. We are almost at the last step of the session, which is the part that deals with ADAudit Plus. So we are done configuring your Active Directory. We've set your Active Directory. It's absolutely ready for being audited, and you can roll out reports. Your auditor is going to be super happy. No problem. That one important step is done. We started out by ensuring that the service account has all the right privileges. We went on to ensure that your Active Directory, the native, is prepped up for the auditing requirements that we are going to ask out of it. And the last step is to get your ADAudit Plus configured for the big picture or the big game. So how do you do it? Get your ADAudit Plus. If you have a running instance of ADAudit Plus, please follow along. It's going to be quite simple and straightforward. How do you do that? You get your domain settings. That's the first thing that you'll want to configure, your domain. And I'll want you to note that ADAudit Plus lets you audit not just one domain, it lets you audit multiple domains based on how you've licensed it. Here you go, you have multiple domains configured. The domain under today's workshop, the one that I have been interested in configuring was the domain right here, that is configured right. So when I get right here, I would want to ensure that there are certain things that are configured right here. But now I have a question from Jafrin. She asks me, how do I add the domain first? Oh, great question. Simple as that. I just say add domain. I get to this window and say domain.com or whichever the domain name is, and then I get to authentication and key in that service account that I've been configuring all along, that one service account that I gave all those privileges. You remember, that is the service account that gets right here. The service account that goes right here could be my account. In this case, it's going to be J. That's the user for who had given all those credentials. The credential to be able to manage audit logs, the credential or privileges to read through event logs, to be able to create GPOs, and yes, the WMI permissions and domain component services privileges as well. So I'm reminding you all of this just so that you don't forget, and it's quite simple when you do this. So you would not just want to stop right there, you'd want to get the right domain controller as well configured. If all of these credentials are right, the domain controller automatically gets discovered. That works like magic almost all the time. In case if you want to manually select it, you can do that as well. So I suggest you pick all the listed domain controllers. You could very much do that. That helps almost all the time. You could do that. Now getting back to the domain settings, thanks for that question, Joffrin. Adding domains is quite simple, straightforward. You can add them right there. Once that's added, it gets listed right here, and when it turns green, it says listening for events. That means you are all set and good to go. Now remember, I had configured it manually, right? I showed you doing it the manual way. But if you're somebody who wants to do it the automatic way, all you have to do is just come right here. So in this domain, I haven't configured it manually, so I have this configure option right here, and audit logon events and object access policy will be enabled for the configured file server or member server via GPO. So for that $1 million question that you had in mind earlier as to why did ADAudit Plus need the GPO privileges, and this is exactly why. So if you want to do it automatically, you would need that privilege. But if you are an administrator who wants to do it this way, the manual way, you are always welcome to do it. All of this is set. The auditing right here is real time. You can set the fetch interval as well, absolutely up to you, and you do not need to worry about the auditing interval. It's real time and absolutely works like magic, because if you were to remember earlier in the presentation, I had showed you as to how the Windows API works to get the data when changes happen in your Active Directory or other systems. No load on your DC, no load on the server that has ADAudit Plus running. So it's quite straightforward. So we've configured the domain, we've added the user account, we've selected the domain controller, and we've also set the fetch interval. Now what are we waiting for? The last step is essentially to get to one of the reports. It's quite easy to access the reports. I'd give you in fact a shortcut. Hold Control and space key down. You would have access to all cool reports and auditing functionalities of ADAudit Plus. In fact, I'm going to quickly show you one functionality for the day before we wind up. How would I not show? Let me give me a quick second. Let me get to my ADUC. I'm all excited right now to check if ADAudit Plus is configured right and working the way I want to. I'm getting to my ADUC right now, getting to the users tab right here. I've got everything configured right now. This should be working properly. So I'll start off with a basic task. of creating a user. So how do I do it? Let's say James, let's say Bond. So James Bond is the user I'm creating. James Bond. All right. Quickly keying in the password. Let's hope ADAudit Plus gets this spot on. Next, finish, and the user is successfully created. So before I get to ADAudit Plus, I would also want you to know the native way. If I were to find out using PowerShell script, this is the script that I'd want to run, right? Shows the recently created users. That's quite simple script if you want just basic attributes in picture, but then that isn't the requirement, is it now? I'm going to quickly run that script. Just a quick second. Got that copied, and I'm going to get to my PowerShell. Okay. Just a quick second. I would want to paste it right there, or take the hard route and show you how it's done typing it. So we are talking about getting a script to do the job for me. Right, I don't seem to have my, and there you go, perfect. Oopsie. So this is the problem. So at times when you get the PowerShell script wrong, you wouldn't really know what to do. I'm going to try and do that once more. Maybe my script didn't work out well. Oopsie. Not a problem, not a problem. So if you were to do it the PowerShell way, you'd receive a huge pile of data. At the same time, you'd know that the user just got created. You'd have quite a few things to work with right here. You get your Windows PowerShell, you ensure that the script is working fine. In my case, it just blew on my face. It didn't work out. At times this happens to all administrators, don't worry, and that's exactly why you would need a tool like ADAudit Plus to save the day. Oof. You get to ADAudit Plus, you get to reports, you check for the right domain, in this case it's ADAPWS, and then you get to the recently created users dashboard, and there you go. I have my user James Bond. I did not have to remember a PowerShell script. The PowerShell script at times could fail on me because I'm ill-informed. I didn't know what to do right there. All that I had to do was get to ADAudit Plus, right? And look for one report that said recently created users, and I have 4 things: the when, the what, the who, and where. Yes, and the where. All of that is in place. So I've got the user who got created, who created the user, at what time did the user get created, in which domain did the user get created, and just in case if I want more options right here, I've got all of that listed right here for you. So what do I want to do? What privileges does the user have? All of that gets listed right here, and you'd be able to see all of that. So quite simple, straightforward. The last bit of the session is more like an introduction to what ADAudit Plus is capable of doing. I would want you to go back, check if you've configured all of these steps rightly. I'm going to give you an access sheet as well. Don't worry. Oh, thank you so much. I'm just taking a look at the chat window right now, and few of you have given me tips on how to get that script right and what was wrong about that script. Thank you for that. So I'll ensure that you get that checklist of things to do to configure your Active Directory domain right and your ADAudit Plus right. It's just a matter of half an hour to get the whole thing started, and after you are set, you are going to get the whole lot of functionalities. We are going to be talking about being able to track all of these, being able to track changes that are made in your domain, track and export reports in real time, get alerts when there are issues with your Active Directory, or if there are any malicious behavior, get real-time alerts. And finally, you'll also have access to quite a lot of consolidated real-time reports out of the box from the solution, just so that you don't forget ADAudit Plus is the tool, and you get to all these functionalities through the next 3 days of the session. So tomorrow's session is going to entail quite a lot on how to get your ADAudit Plus compliance reporting in place. You definitely not want to miss tomorrow's session. Now that there is GDPR in place and quite a lot of other regulations in place, we are going to be talking about PII, we're going to be talking about SOX, HIPAA and all those compliance, talk about how user activities get tracked, how accounts get modified, and how ADAudit Plus can help you perform change auditing to the fullest. Alright, so before we wind up, I am going to quickly get back to my presentation and show you one last time what's what. So we started off setting up a service account. We went on to configure the auditing policies in your Active Directory to ensure it's ready for auditing. And the last thing that we did was we messed up a PowerShell script, but then ADAudit Plus was there to save your day by helping you generate an out-of-the-box report. That is pretty much it for today's session. Thank you so much for having taken the time and for having patiently stayed through the entire session. It means a lot to us. We hope the sessions are of quite good value, and the video of this session is also going to be available. All you'll have to do is just write to me. My email ID is jay@manageengine.com, or just drop me a message right now on chat, and we'd love to send over the video, the presentation deck, and the action sheet, or the cheat sheet that I was talking about, that tells you what to do step by step. All of that is going to be available. Guys, you've been wonderful. In case if there are any questions, I would be taking them right now on the chat. Awesome. You guys are very supportive. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to send out an email to all of you guys with the video. No problem. It's going to be there on your inbox even before you know it. So tomorrow, same time, looking forward to see you all. There's going to be a lot that's going to be coming up. In fact, tomorrow's session is going to be on quite a few interesting topics. How to get your compliance sorted right. See you tomorrow. Until next time, this is Jay. See you tomorrow, same time. Don't forget, do come. And before I sign off, please make sure that you attend all 4 sessions, because we've got an exciting quiz that we've put together, an interesting quiz that you could take and get certified officially to being a product expert in ADAudit Plus. And for you to be able to do that, you would need to be a part of all 4 sessions, because I'll be giving you away all the answers for the quiz through the 4 sessions. All right, lovely. Thank you so much once again, guys. You've been great. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.